Sniblet number 8.
All right.
Well, welcome.
Second part of this communication thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, we won't even be through with that. I think there's a lot with communication.
But listening and expressing, second part of that,
Yeah.
that piece of it. Yeah.
You know, last week Julie shared the James Cofield quote, vulnerability is the skin that intimacy lives on. In other words, we have to create a safe environment to be vulnerable. There's no way you're going to be vulnerable if you're not safe.
And we won't have true communication if we don't feel safe.
We visited last week James 1:19. Let's read it again because it's that, I think it's this other part of the other side of the coin. It says, but let everyone be quick to hear. That's what we looked at last week. But slow to speak and slow to anger. Now notice it doesn't say don't speak, but you pick up that when we speak, we need to do it in a way that's deliberate, that's measured, so that the environment for safe communication is built. So, Julie, how do we speak in a way to help each other understand where the other person's coming from?
Well, you know, you think about that, James 1:19, be slow to hear, quick to hear, quick to hear. And I think in order to do that, it puts to life that old phrase we've all grown up with, think before you speak. You know, basically, the unrehearsed words are typically the ones that get us into the most trouble. The ones that we don't pause and think, how is this going to land, that we just are spewing. Some of you are like Dan. Dan is an outward processor, and so he says most of the time what he's thinking, and that we've gotten to where we really work with that.
Not from the pulpit, but more in just kind of
in our
day-to-day
everyday life. Yeah, and so Dan processes verbally his thoughts as he's making sense of them. And so early on in our marriage, that caused us a lot of tension and conflict because I would conclude that Dan absolutely meant as truth every single thing that he was outward processing.
Give an example.
Well, there would be many times where the kids would be all running through the house or whatever, and the boys would, deck one another or something would happen, and it would just be everything breaks loose.
Yeah,
and
you almost said it.
I did.
Yeah.
And you would say, okay, that's it. We're sending Blake to military school or Cooper to military school. And I literally would have a moment of thinking, we can't do that. Like, what are you thinking? Who are you? So for some of you outward processors, it's a skill of learning to maybe say a little less. Or one thing we've learned to do is Dan actually says now and has for years, okay, I'm just going to outward process for a little bit. If we're taking a walk or something, which says to me, just listen. And I don't mean every single thing I'm saying. It's just I'm thinking a lot of things. And then for some of you who are more introverted or internal thinkers, inward processors, you actually need to develop the skill of saying some of the things that you're thinking, because we know that you have a lot going on, but you often can indicate that you are not feeling something or thinking something because you don't say as much. And so for one, there needs to be less communicated. For another, there may be more that needs to be communicated.
With an inward processor, we might think everything is going well.
Right. And that
simply
may not be the
because
case.
they haven't communicated, so we just assume.
Yeah.
Let's get more practical. Let me read Proverbs 21, verse 23, and then I'm going to ask you a question. Listen to this. It says, he who guards his mouth and his tongue guards his soul from troubles. You sense there's a lot of trouble we can produce with our mouth. And the scriptures aren't silent about that.
Right, they're full of passages about our tongue.
Yeah, you get the feeling that we can get in a lot less trouble listening than when we're talking.
Right.
And that doesn't mean we shouldn't talk. But what are some troubled spots? And rather than troubled spots, let's call them landmines.
Yeah.
What do you think of when you think of landmines with our with our speaking?
Yeah, that idea of we're walking along and something just literally blows up. Here's a blow up situation, or what I would call trigger words. That's one of the biggest ones. Our easy use of trigger words like always and never. Those can get us almost 100% of the time, I didn't want to say always, almost 100% of the time into deep waters. For instance, you are always late. Second night of the week, your husband comes in late, and that is what you say to him. Or a comment like, you never spend time with the kids, you're so busy. So what happens is in those always and never statements, it instantly puts the other person on the defensive because that's never really true.
Yeah.
Here I just used the word never. But
Yeah.
those 100% statements are just not true all the time. You're often late, or you're not getting to spend as much time with the kids as I'd like you to, whatever. But those separate and cause defensiveness to set up, and that's not what you're wanting to have take place at all. That's not going to increase the odds of good communication. Another landmine would be the easy use of mean and insulting words, which when you're frustrated and you're mad, that's very easy to do. But the reason that what comes up to the surface, mean and insulting words, is usually because we've really been hurt about something. And so when we've been hurt, we want to hurt back. And I think that is for yourself, if you can have that ability to really ask God to give you some wisdom in these situations, let that be a red flag to yourself. That's an indicative statement that you need some time to talk. It's important.
I would add to that list sarcasm.
Definitely.
The word sarcasm in the Latin means to cut. And I think the best description I've heard of sarcasm, it's like, taking a paper cut and sprinkling lemon juice in.
Yeah, it just hurts.
There's a sense of sting there. When we're sarcastic, we might laugh on the outside, but on the inside, it hurts a little bit, because with sarcasm, there's always a grain of truth in it.
Yes, always. Here we use always.
Yeah,
Most often, there is a grain of truth in it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so it's like, man, stay away from the sarcasm.
Yeah.
So how is it possible to express our feelings in a way that we can be heard?
Yeah.
And how do we do that?
Well, I think one thing that we pass on as often as we can, because we were told this little tool many, many years ago, and it's been very helpful to Dan and I, and helpful to many couples, and even in our parenting, is this practicing and learning and have become part of your vocabulary, this easy, it's kind of like a formula, but a learning way to say, I feel emotion, fill in the blank, when you fact, fill in the blank. Let me give you an example.
Yeah.
I feel unimportant when you are late. So just hear the difference between me saying to Dan, you are always late, puts him on the defensive and it points a finger. Whereas when I say to him, I feel unimportant when you are late. So I feel emotion when you fact. Another one, I feel lonely as a parent when you don't participate with the kids. I feel emotion and then a fact. I feel unnecessary when you don't ask my input regarding financial decisions. So what happens in this, it's mysterious how it happens, but what it does is it makes you are increasing your ability to communicate what is deep down in here, which are the things that need to be talked about. And that's what comes to the surface rather than the attack, which then ends up in a very ugly place almost all the time.
And those I feel when you fact statements, what they do is they cause the other person not to react.
Right.
Because if you're going, you always and you never, we react to those. But when you say, I feel this way when this situation happens, it causes the person to go, wow, I didn't mean to do that.
Right.
It stops the reaction.
And it increases the odds that you're going to move toward a back and forth conversation of listening and expressing, which is the goal.
In kind of wrapping all this up, I think Mark Twain's quote came to me, the idea that when you have nothing to say, don't give wordy evidence to the fact. And I think we can get ourselves in so much trouble. I think unrehearsed words always get me in the most trouble. So the idea, stay away from the always, never, insulting words, sarcasm, stay away from those. All those sabotage vulnerability.
Right.
So next week, what we're going to look at is how to share your heart with one another.
Yeah.
So I'll see you next week.
Yeah.